Chapter 6. The Journey from the Platform 9 3/4. Harry's last month with the Dursleys wasn't fun. True, Dudley was now so scared of Harry he wouldn't even say in the same room. While Aunt Petunia and Uncle Vernon didn't shut Harry in his cupboard, force him to do anything, or shout at him. In fact, they didn't speak to him at all. Half terrified, half furious, they acted as though any chair with Harry in it was empty. Although this was an improvement in many ways, it did become a bit depressing after a while. Harry kept to his room with his new owl for company. He had decided to call her Hedwig, a name he found in the History of Magic. His school books were very interesting. He lay on his bed reading late into the night, Hedwig swooping in and out of the open window as she pleased. It was lucky that Aunt Petunia didn't come into the vacuum any more, because Hedwig kept bringing back dead mice. Every night before he went to sleep, Harry ticked off another day on the place of the paper he had pinned to the wall, counting down to September 1st. On the last day of August, he thought he'd better speak to his aunt and uncle about getting to King's Crossing station the next day. So he went down to the living room where they were watching the show on television. He cleared his throat to let them know he was there, and Dudley screamed and ran from the room. Er, Uncle Vernon? Uncle Vernon grunted to show he was listening. I need to get to King's Crossing tomorrow. Do you know, go to Hogwarts? Uncle Vernon grunted again. Would it be all right if you gave me a lift? Harry grunted. Harry supposed that meant yes. Thank you. And he was about to go back upstairs when Uncle Vernon actually spoke. Funny way to get the wizards to school. The train. Magic carpets all gone. All got punctures, have they? Harry didn't say anything. Where's the school anyway? I don't know, Harry said, realizing for the first time he pulled the ticket Hagrid had given him out of his pocket. It just says the train on the platform of 9 3/4 be at 11 o'clock, he read. His Aunt Petunia stared. Platform what? 9 3/4. Oh, don't talk rubbish, said Uncle Vernon. There's no platform 9 3/4. It's on my ticket. Barking, said Uncle Vernon. Howling mad. The lot of them, you'll see. You'll just wait. All right. We'll take you to King's Crossing. Yes, we'll go there up to London tomorrow. Anyway, I wouldn't bother. Why are you going to London? Harry asked, trying to keep things friendly. Taking Dudley to the hospital, growled Uncle Vernon. Got to get that ruddy little tail removed before he goes to Smeltings. Harry woke up at 5 o'clock the next morning. He was too excited and too nervous to go back to sleep. He got and pulled on his jeans because he didn't want to walk around the station in wizard's robes. He changed on the train. He checked into Hogwarts list again to make sure he had everything he needed. He saw that Hedwig was shut safely in her cage, then paced the room waiting for the Dursleys to get up. 2 hours later, Harry's huge, heavy trunk had been loaded into the Dursleys' car, and Petunia had talked Dudley into sitting next to Harry, and off they set. They reached King's Crossing at 10:30. Uncle Henrik dumped Harry's trunk onto the cart and wheeled it into the station for him. Harry thought it was strangely kind of Uncle Vernon and stopped dead, facing the platform with a nasty little grin on his face. Well, there you are, me boy. Platform 9 3/4. There's platform 9 and there's platform 10. Your platform should be somewhere in the middle, but they don't seem to have built it yet, have they? He was quite right, of course. There was a big plastic number 9 on the platform, and a big plastic number 10 over the next one. In the middle there was nothing. Have a good term, said Uncle Vernon, with an even nastier smile. And he left without another word. Harry turned and saw the Dursleys drive away. All three of them were laughing. Harry's mouth went dry. What on earth was he supposed to do? He was starting to attract a lot of funny looks because of Hedwig. He'd have to ask someone. He stopped a passing guard, but he didn't dare mention a platform 9 3/4. The guard had never heard of Hogwarts, and when Harry couldn't even tell him what part of the country it was, he started to get annoyed, as though Harry was being stupid on purpose. Getting desperate, Harry asked the train that left at 11 o'clock, but the guard said wasn't one. In the end, the guard strode away, muttering about some time wasters. Harry was trying hard not to panic. According to the large clock over the arrivals, there had been 10 minutes left to get on the train to Hogwarts. He had no idea how to do it. He was stranded in the middle of the station with a trunk he could barely lift and a pocket full of wizard money and a large owl. Hagrid must have forgotten to tell him something he had to do, like tapping a third brick or that left in to Diagon Alley. He wondered if he should get out his wand and start tapping. Ticket inspectors stand between platforms 9 and 10. At the moment, a group of people passed just ahead of him. He caught a few words, packed with muggles, of course. Harry swung around. The speaker was a plump woman who was talking to four boys, all with flaming red hair. Each of them was pushing the trunk like Harry in front of them, and they had an owl. Heartwarming, Harry pushed his cart after them. They stopped, and so did he, just near enough to hear the words they were saying. Now, what's that platform number? The boy said to his mother. 9 3/4, piped a small girl, also red-headed, who was holding on to her hand. Mom, can I go? You're not old enough, Ginny. Now be quiet. All right, Percy, you go first. What looked like the oldest boy marched toward the platforms 9 and 10. Harry watched, careful not to blink in case he missed it. But just as the boy reached the dividing barrier between the two platforms, a large crowd of tourists came swarming in front of him, and by the time the last backpack had cleared away, the boy had vanished. Fred, you next, the plump woman said. I'm not Fred, I'm George, said the boy. Honestly, woman, you call yourself our mother. Can't you tell I'm George? Sorry, George, dear. Only joking. I'm Fred, said the boy, and off he went. His twin called after him, Hurry up! He must have done so, 'cause a second later he was gone. But how had he done it? Now the third brother was walking briskly to the barrier. He was almost there, and then quite suddenly he wasn't there. There was nothing for it. Excuse me, Harry said to the plump woman. Hello, dear, she said. First time at Hogwarts, or aunt's new too? She pointed to the last and youngest of her sons. He was tall and thin and gangling, with freckles, big hands and feet, and a long nose. Yes, Harry said. The thing is, I don't know how to. Oh, how to get to the platform, she said kindly, and Harry nodded. Oh, not to worry, she said. All you have to do is walk straight into the barrier between the platforms 9 and 10. Don't stop. Don't be scared. You'll crash into it. That's very important. Best do it as if you run if you're nervous. Go on now before Ron. Okay, said Harry. He pushed the trolley around, stared at the barrier, and looked very solid. He started to walk towards it. People around him trolled their way to the platforms 9 and 10. Harry walked more quickly. He was going to smash right into that barrier if he'd had trouble. Leaning forward on his cart, he broke into the heavy run. The barrier was coming nearer, nearer, nearer. He wouldn't be able to stop. The cart was out of control. He was a foot away. He closed his eyes, ready for the crash. It didn't come. He kept on running. He opened his eyes. A scarlet steam engine was waiting next to the platform, packed with people. A sign overhead said Hogwarts Express. 11 o'clock. Harry looked behind him and saw a wrought iron archway where the barrier had been, with the words platform 9 3/4. He had done it. Smoke and the engine drifted over the heads of the chattering crowd, while cats of every color wound up here and there between their legs. Owls hooted to one another, disgruntled sort of way, over the babbled scraping of the heavy trunks. The first few carriages were already packed with students, some hanging out of the window and some talking to their families, some fighting over seats. Harry pushed his cart down to the platform in search of an empty seat. He passed around faced boy who was saying, Gran, I've lost my toad again. Oh, Neville, he heard the old woman sigh. A boy with dreadlocks was surrounded by a small crowd. Give us a look, Lee. Go on. The boy lifted a box in his arms, and the people around him shrieked and yelled. Something inside poked out of the long, hairy leg. Harry pressed on through the crowd until he found an empty compartment near the end of the train. He put Hedwig inside and then started to shove the heavy trunk towards the train door. He tried to lift it up the steps, but he could barely raise it with one hand. Twice he dropped it painfully on his toe. Want a hand? Said one of the red-haired twins as he followed through the barrier. Yes, please, Harry said. Oh, oi, Fred, come here, help! With the twins' help, Harry's trunk was at last tucked away in the corner of the compartment. Thanks, Harry said, his sweaty hair out of his eyes. What's that? One of the twins suddenly said, pointing to Harry's lightning scar. Blimey, said the other twin. Are you? He is, the first one said. Aren't you? He added to Harry. What? Said Harry. Harry Potter, chorused the twins. Oh, him, said Harry. I mean, yes, I am. The boys gawked at him, and Harry felt himself turning red. Then he felt his relief when the voice came floating through the train's open door. Fred! George! Are you there? Coming, Mum. With a last look at Harry, the twins hopped off the train. Harry sat down next to the window where the half was half hidden. He could watch the red-haired family on the platform and hear what they were saying. The mother had just taken out her handkerchief. Ron, you've got something on your nose. The younger boy tried to jerk out of the way, but she grabbed him and began to rubbing the end of his nose. Mom, get off! He wiggled free. Ah! Has Eagle Ronnie got something on his nose? Said one of the twins. Shut up, said Ron. Where's Percy? Said the mother. He's coming now. The eldest boy came strutting into the sight. He had already changed into his billowing black Hogwarts robes. Harry noticed a shiny red and gold badge on his chest with the letter P on it. Can't stay long, Mother, he said. I'm up in front. The prefects have got 2 compartments to themselves. Oh, you're a prefect, Percy, said one of the twins, with an air of great surprise. You should have said something. We had no idea. Hang on. Oh, I think I remember him saying something about it, said one of the other twins. Once. Or twice. A minute. All summer. Oh, shut up, said Percy, the prefect. Now, how come Percy gets 2 new robes anyway? Said one of the twins. Because he's a prefect, said their mother fondly. All right, dear. Well, have a good term. Send me an owl when you get there. She kissed Percy on the cheek and he left. Then she turned to the twins. Now you two. This year you behave yourselves. If I get one more owl telling me you've blown up a toilet or blown up a toilet? We've never blown up a toilet. Great idea though. Thanks, Mom. It's not funny. And look after Ronnie. Don't worry, Ickle Ronnykins will be safe with us. Shut up, said Ron again. He was almost as tall as the twins already. His nose was still pink, where his mother had rubbed it. Hey, Mom, guess what? Guess what we just saw on the train? Harry leaned back quickly so they couldn't see him looking. You know that black-haired boy who was near us in the station? You know who he is? Who? Harry Potter. Harry heard the little girl's voice. Oh, Mom! Can I go on the train and see him, Mom? Oh, please! You've already seen him, Ginny. And the poor boy isn't something to goggle at like a zoo. Is he really, Fred? How do you know? I asked him. I saw a scar. It's really there, like lightning. Oh, poor dear. No wonder he was alone. Oh, I wondered. He was ever so polite when he asked how to get to the platform. Never mind. Do you think he remembers? You know what looks like? Their mother suddenly became very stern. I forbid you to ask him, Fred. No, don't you dare. As though he needs some reminding of that on his first day of school. All right, keep your hair on. The whistle sounded. Hurry up! Their mother said. The three boys clambered onto the train, and they leaned out the window for her to kiss them good-bye, and their youngest sister began to cry. Don't, Ginny. We'll be back with loads of owls. We'll send loads of owls. We'll send you Ogwat's toilet seat. George! Only joking, Mom. The train began to move, and Hattie and the boys and the mother waving. Their sister half laughing, half crying, running to keep up with the train until it gathered too much speed, and then she fell back and waved. Harry watched the girl and the mother disappear. As the train rounded the corner, houses flashed by past the window. Harry felt a great leap of excitement. He didn't know what he was going to, but it had to be better than what he was leaving behind. The door of the compartment slid open and the youngest red-headed boy came in. Anyone sitting there? He asked, pointing to the seat opposite Harry. Everywhere else is full. Harry shook his head, and the boy sat down. He glanced at Harry and then looked up quickly from the window, pretending he hadn't looked. Harry saw he still had a black mark on his nose. Hey, Ron? The twins were back. Listen, we're going to the middle of the train. Lee Jordan's got a giant tarantula down there. Right, mumbled Ron. Hetty, said to the other twin, did we introduce ourselves? Fred and George Weasley. And this is Ron, our brother. See you later, then. Bye, said Harry and Ron. The twins slid the compartment door shut behind them. Are you really Harry Potter? Ron blurted out. Harry nodded. Oh, well then. I thought it might be one of Fred and George's jokes, said Ron. You have really got. You know, he pointed to Harry's forehead. Harry pulled back his bangs to show him his lightning scar. Ron stared. So that's where you know who. Yes, said Harry. But I can't remember any of it. Nothing? Ron said eagerly. Well, I remember a lot of green light, but nothing else. Wow, said Ron. He sat back and stared at Harry for a few minutes, as though he had suddenly realized that he was doing. Looked quickly out of the window again. Are all your family wizards? Asked Harry, who found Ron just as interesting as Ron found him. Yes, I think so, said Ron. I think Mom's got a second cousin who is an accountant, but we never talk about him. So you must know loads of magic already. The Weasleys were clearly one of those old wizarding families the pale boy in Diagon Alley was talking about. I heard they went to live with muggles, said Ron. What are they like? Horrible. Well, not all of them. My aunt and uncle and cousin are, though. I wish I had 3 wizard brothers. 5, said Ron. For some reason, he was looking gloomy. I'm the 6th in our family to go to Hogwarts. You could say I've got lots to live up to. Bill and Charlie have already left. Bill is a head boy, and Charlie was a captain of the Quidditch, and now Percy's a prefect. Although Fred and George mess around a lot, they still get really good marks, and everyone thinks they're really funny. Everyone expects me to do as well as the others, but if I do, it's no big deal, because they did it first. You never get anything new either with 5 brothers. I've got Bill's old robes, Charlie's old wand, Percy's old rat. Ron reached inside his jacket and pulled out a fat gray rat, which was asleep. His name is Scabbers, and he's useless. He hardly ever wakes up. Percy got an owl for my dad for being making prefect, but they couldn't. Scabbers instead. Ron's ears went pink. He seemed to think that he said too much, but then he went back to staring out the window. Harry didn't think there was anything wrong with not being able to afford an owl. After all, he'd never had any money in his life until a month ago. And then he told Ron all about having to wear Dudley's old clothes and never getting proper birthday presents. That seemed to cheer Ron up. And until Hagrid told me, I knew nothing about being a wizard, or my parents, or Voldemort. Ron gasped. What? Said Harry. You said you know whose name, said Ron, sounding both shocked and impressed. Oh, I thought, of all people, I'm not trying to be brave or anything, saying his name, said Harry. I just never knew. You shouldn't. See what I mean? I've got loads to learn. I bet, he added, voicing the first time something that he'd been worrying him a lot lately. I bet I'm the worst in the class. Oh, you won't be. There are loads of people who come from Muggle families, and they learn quick enough. While they had been talking, the train carried them off to London. Now they were speeding past fields full of cows and sheep, and they were quiet for a time, watching the fields and lanes flick past. Around 12:30, there was a great clattering outside the corridor, and smiling, dimpled woman slid back her door and said, "Anything from the cart, dears?" Harry hadn't had breakfast. He leapt to his feet, but Ron's ears went pink again, and he muttered that he'd brought a sandwich. Harry went into the corridor. He had never had money for candy with the Dursleys, so now that he had pockets rattling with gold and silver, he was ready to buy as many Mars bars as could carry. But the woman didn't have Mars bars. What she did have were Bertie Bott's beans, every flavor beans, Drudel's best blowing gum, chocolate frogs, pumpkin pasties, cauldron cake, licorice wands, and a number of other strange things Harry had never seen in his life. Not wanting to miss anything, he got some of everything, paid the woman 11 silver sickles, and even 7 bronze nuts. Ron stared at Harry, and Bruni brought a bowl back into the apartment and tipped it into the empty seat. Hungry, are you? Starving, said Harry, taking a large bite out of the pumpkin pastry. Ron had taken out a lumpy package and unwrapped it. There were 4 sandwiches inside. He pulled out one of them apart and said, "She always forgets I don't like corned beef." "Swap you for one of these," said Harry, holding up a pasty. "Go on." "You don't want this. It's all dry," said Ron. "She hasn't got much time," he added quickly. "You know, with 5 of us." "Go on, have a pasty," said Harry, who had never had anything to share before, or, indeed, anyone to share it with. It was quite a nice feeling sitting there with Ron, eating the way through all the Harry's pasties and cakes and candies, and the sandwiches lay forgotten. "What are these?" Harry asked Ron, holding up a pack of chocolate frogs. "They're not really frogs, are they?" He was starting to feel like nothing would surprise him. "Oh, no," said Ron. "But see what the card says? I'm missing Agrippa." "What?" "Oh, of course you wouldn't know. Chocolate frogs have cards inside them, you know, to collect. Famous witches and wizards. I've got about 500, but I haven't got Agrippa or Ptolemy." Hetty unwrapped the chocolate frog and picked up the card. It showed a man's face. He wore half-moon glasses and a long, crooked nose, and flowing hair and beard and mustache underneath this picture was Albus Dumbledore. "So this is Dumbledore?" said Harry. "Don't tell me you've never heard of Dumbledore," said Ron. "Can I have a frog? I might get Agrippa. Thanks." Harry turned the card over and read, "Albus Dumbledore, currently headmasters of Hogwarts. Considered by many the greatest wizard of modern times, Dumbledore is particularly famous for his defeat of the dark wizard Grindelwald in 1945, the discovery of the 12 uses of dragon's blood, and the work on alchemy with his partner, Nicholas Flamel. Professor Dumbledore enjoys chamber music and 10-pin bowling." Harry turned the card back over and saw the astonishment that Dumbledore's face had disappeared. "He's gone." "Well, you can't expect him to hang around all day," said Harry. "He'll be back soon." "No, I've got Morgana again. Ugh, I've got about 6 of her. Do you want it? You can start collecting." Ron's eyes strayed to the pile of chocolate frogs waiting unwrapped. "Help yourself," said Harry. "But in you know that world people just stay put in their photos." "Do they? Well, why don't they move at all?" Ron sounded amazed. "Weird." Harry stared at Dumbledore as Dumbledore slid back into the picture on his card and gave him a small smile. Ron was more interested in eating the frogs and looking at the famous wizards and witches cards, but Harry couldn't keep their eyes off them. Soon he had only Dumbledore, Morgana, Ingrist Woodcroft, Elberich Gruninen, Circus, Perleus, and Merlin. He finally tore his eyes away from the Drudies and Ciclinida, who was scratching her nose to open a bag of Bertie Bolt flavor beans. Oh, you want to be careful with those, Ron warned Harry. When you say every flavor, they mean every flavor. You know, you get all the ordinary ones like chocolate and peppermint and marmalade. But then you can get spinach and liver and tripe. George reckons he's had a booger flavored once. Ron picked up the green bean, looked at it carefully, and bit into the corner. Blech! See? Sprouts. They had a good time eating every flavor beans. Harry got toast, coconut, baked beans, strawberry, curry, grass, coffee, sardine, and was even brave enough to nibble the end of a funny gray one. Ron wouldn't touch it, which turned out to be Peppa. The countryside now flying by the window was becoming wilder. Neat fields had gone. Now there were woods and twisting rivers and dark green hills. There was a knock on the door in the compartments, and a moon-faced boy, Harry, had passed the platform at 9 3/4, came in. He looked tearful. "Sorry," he said, "but have you seen a toad at all?" When they shook their heads, he wailed, "Oh, I've lost him. He keeps going away from me." "Oh, he'll turn up," said Harry. "Yes," said the boy miserably. "What if you see him?" He left. "Don't know why he's so bothered," Ron said. "If I'd been brought a toad, I'd lose it as quick as I could, mind you. I brought Scabbers, so I can't talk." The rat was still snoozing on Ron's lap. "He might have died, and you wouldn't know the difference," said Ron in disgust. "I tried to turn him yellow yesterday and make him more interesting, but the spell didn't work. I'll show you. Look." He rummaged around in his trunk, pulled out a very battered looking wand. It was chipped in some places, something white was glinting on the end. Unicorn hair nearly poking out anyway. We had just raised his wand to the compartment door, slid open again. The toadless boy was back, but this time he had a girl with him. She was already wearing her new Hogwarts robes. "Has anyone seen a toad? Neville's lost one," she said. She was a very bossy sort of voice, lots of bushy brown hair, and rather large front teeth. "We've already told him we haven't seen it," said Ron, but the girl wasn't listening. She was looking at the wand in his hand. "Oh, are you doing magic? Let's see then." She sat down. Ron looked taken aback. All right." He cleared his throat. "Sunshine daisies, butter mellow, turn this stupid fat rat yellow." He waved his wand, but nothing happened. Scabbers stayed gray and fast asleep. "Are you sure that's a real spell?" asked the girl. "Well, it's not a very good one, isn't it? I've tried a few simple spells, just for practice. It's all worked for me. Nobody in my family has magic at all. If it was ever such a surprise when I got my letter. But I was ever so pleased, of course. I mean, it's the very best school of witchcraft there is, I heard. I've learned all about the course of books by heart, of course. I just hope it will be enough. I'm Hermione Granger, by the way." "Who are you?" he said. She said it also very fast. Harry looked at Ron, who was relieved to see the stunned face that he hadn't learned all in the course books by heart either. "I'm Ron Weasley," muttered Ron. "Harry Potter," said Harry. "Are you really?" said Hermione. "I know all about you, of course. I've got a few extra books for background reading. And you're the modern magic history, and the rise and fall of the dark arts, and the great wizarding events of the 20th century." "Am I?" said Harry, feeling dazed. "Goodness! Didn't you know? I found out everything I could have. It was me," said Hermione. "Do either of you know what house you'll be in? I've been asking all around. I hope I'm in Gryffindor. It sounds by far the best. I heard Dumbledore himself was in it. But I suppose Ravenclaw wouldn't be too bad. Anyway, we better go get a look for Neville's toad. You two had better change, you know. I expect we'll be there soon." And she left. taking the toadless boy with her. Whatever house I'm in, I hope she's not in it, said Ron. He threw his wand back in his trunk. Stupid spell. George gave it to me. I bet he knew it was a dud. What house are you brothers in? Asked Harry. Oh, Gryffindor, said Ron. Gloom seemed to settle in on him again. Mom and Dad were in it too. I don't know what they'll say if I'm not. I suppose Ravenclaw wouldn't be too bad. But imagine if I got me in Slytherin. That's the house I mean, you know who was in? Yeah, said Ron. He flopped back on his seat, looking impressed. You know, I think in the end Scaba's whiskers are a bit lighter, said Harry, trying to take Ron's mind off the houses. So what does your oldest brother do now that they've left anyway? Harry was wondering what a wizard did after they finished school. Well, Charlie's in Romania. He's studying dragons. And he's in Africa, doing something with Gringotts, said Ron. Did you hear about Gringotts? It's been all over the Daily Prophet. I don't suppose you get that with your muggles. Someone tried to rob the high security vault. Harry stared. Really? What happened to them? Nothing. That's why it's such big news. They haven't been caught. My dad said they must have some powerful dark wizard to get into around Gringotts, but they didn't think to took anything. That's what's so odd. Course, everyone gets scared when something like this happens. You know who is behind it. Harry turned the news over in his mind. He was starting to get a prickle of fear every time you know who was mentioned. He supposed it was all part of entering the magic world, but he had not been comfortable saying Voldemort without worrying. What's your Quidditch team? Ron asked. I don't know any, Harry confessed. What? Said Ron dumbfounded. Oh, yeah, you wait. It's the best game in the world. And he was off explaining all about the 4 balls and the positions and the 7 players, describing famous games they'd all been with the brothers and the broomsticks, and he'd like to get one if he had the money. He was just talking to Harry through the finer points of the games when the compartment door slid open, and yet again it was Neville and the toadless boy, or Hermione Granger this time. 3 boys entered. Harry recognized the middle one as the boy from Madame Malcolm's robe shop. He was looking at Harry with a lot more interest than he'd shown back then at Diagon Alley. Is it true? He said. They're saying all down here the train that Harry Potter's in this compartment. So is it you, is it? Yes, said Harry. He was looking at the other boys. Both of them were thick set and looked extremely mean, standing on the other side of the pale boy. And they looked at the bodyguard. Oh, this is Crabbe and this is Goyle, said the pale boy carelessly, noticing Harry was looking. And my name's Malfoy, Draco Malfoy. Ron gave a slight cough, which might have been hiding a snigger. Draco Malfoy looked at him. Think my name's funny, do you? No need to ask who you are. My father told me the Weasleys have a red hair, freckles, and more children than they can afford. He turned back to Harry. You'll find some wizarding families are much better than others, Potter. You don't want to go making friends with the wrong sort. I can help you there. He held out his hand to shake Harry's, but Harry didn't take it. I think I can tell with the wrong sort for myself, thanks, he said coolly. Draco Malfoy didn't go red, but pink tinge appeared in his pale cheeks. I'd be careful if I were you, Potter, he said slowly. Unless you're a bit politer, you'll go the same way as your parents did. They didn't know what was good for them either. You hang around with riffraff like the Weasleys and Hagrid. They'll rub off on you. Both Harry and Ron stood up. Say that again, said Ron, his face as red as his hair. Oh, so you're going to fight us, are you? Malfoy sneered. Unless you get out of here now, said Harry more bravely than he felt, because Crabbe and Goyle were a lot bigger than him or Ron. But we don't feel like leaving, do we, boys? We've eaten all of our food, and you still seem to have some. Goyle reached towards the chocolate frogs next to Ron. Ron leapt forward, but before he could do much, he as touched Goyle. Goyle let out a horrible yell. Scabbers the rat was hanging off his finger, his sharp little teeth sunk into Goyle's knuckle. Crabbe and Malfoy backed away. as Goyle swung Scabbers around and around and around, hollering that Scabbers finally flew off, hit the window, and all three of them disappeared at once. Perhaps they thought there were more rats lurking among them in the suites, or perhaps they've heard footsteps because seconds later Hermione Granger came in. What has been going on? She said, looking at the suites over the floor, Ron picking up Scabbers by the tail. I think he's been knocked clean out, Ron said to Harry, and he looked closer at Scabbers. No, I don't believe it. He's gone back to sleep. So he had. You've met Malfoy before? Harry explained about their meeting with Diagon Alley. I heard of his family, Ron said darkly. They're some of the first who came back to our side after you-know-who disappeared. Said they'd been bewitched. My dad doesn't believe it. He says Malfoy's father didn't need an excuse to go over to the dark side. He turned to Hermione. Can we help you with something? You'd better hurry up and put your robes on. I just been up to the front and asked the conductor, and he says we're nearly there. You haven't been fighting, have you? You'll be in trouble before you even get there. Scabbers has been fighting, not us, said Ron, scowling at her. Would you mind leaving us while we change? Oh, all right. I can only imagine. I only came in here because people outside are behaving childishly, racing up and down the corridors, said Hermione in a sniffy voice. And you've got dirt on your nose, by the way, did you know? Ron glared at her as she left. Harry peered out the window. It was getting dark. You could see the mountains and forests under a deep purple sky. The train did seem to be slowing down. He and Ron took off their jackets, pulled on their long black robes. Ron's were a bit shorter for him. He could see his sneakers underneath him. A voice echoed through the train. We'll be reaching Hogwarts in about 5 minutes' time. Please leave your luggage on the train. We'll take this to the school separately. Harry's stomach lurched with nerves, and Ron, he saw, looked pale under his freckles. They crammed their pockets for the last bit of sweets and joined the crowd thronging in the corridor. The train slowed down and finally stopped. People pushed their way towards the door and out to the tiny, dark platform. Harry shivered in the cold night air. The lamp came bobbing up over the students, and Harry heard a familiar voice. First years, over here. All right, there, Harry. Hagrid's big, hairy face booming over the seas of lands. Come on, follow me. Any more first years? Mind your step now. First years, follow me. Slipping through this and stumbling, they followed Hagrid down to what seemed to be a steep, narrow path. It was so dark, and at either side of them, Harry thought, might be the thickest trees there. Nobody spoke much. Neville, the boy who kept losing his toad, sniffed it once or twice. You'll get to first year at Hogwarts in a sec, Hagrid called over his shoulder. Just around the bend here. There was a loud "Ooh!" The narrow path opened up suddenly into a edge of a great black lake. Perched on top of a high mountain on the other side were the windows of the sparkling in the starry sky, a vast castle with many turrets and towers. No more for a boat, Hagrid called, pointing to the fleet of little boats on the water that shone. Harry and Ron were followed in by the boats by Neville and Hermione. Everyone in? Shouted Hagrid, who had a boat for himself. Right then, forward! And the fleet of little boats moved forward all at once, gliding across the lake, which was smooth as glass. Everyone was silent and staring up at the great castle overhead. It towered over them as they sailed near and near to the cliff, which was where it stood. Heads down! Yelled Hagrid. The first-year boats reached the cliff, and they all bent their heads. The little boats carried them through the curtains of the ivy that hid the wide opening in the cliff face. They were carried along a dark tunnel which seemed to be taking them right underneath the castle, until they reached a kind of underground harbor. There was a clambered out onto the rocks and the pebbles. Aye, you're here! Is this your Toad? Said Hagrid, who was checking the boat, and people climbed out of them. Trevor! Cried Neville blissfully, holding out his hands. Then they climbed up the passenger's rock. After Hagrid's lamp, coming out onto the smooth, damp grass right in front of the shadowy castle, they walked up the flight of stone steps, crowded around the huge oak front door. Everyone here? You there. You still got your toad? Hagrid raised a gigantic fist and knocked 3 times on the castle door.